Welcome, history fans. Today we re-diving into the Viking Age to ask a big question. Were the Norsemen ruthless barbarians bent on pillage, or masterful seafarers and traders who reshaped medieval Europe? In this video, we contrast the Hollywood image of horn-helmet raiders with the latest archaeological discoveries, from ship burials and hoards to bustling trading towns. You'll see how longships navigated oceans and rivers alike, how Viking merchants connected Scandinavia to Baghdad and Byzantium, and how farmsteads and settlements reveal everyday life beyond the battlefield. By the end, you'll understand why Vikings were both feared warriors and savvy entrepreneurs, and why the truth is far more fascinating than any legend. If you love uncovering real history behind the myths, hit like and subscribe, and let's set sail into the Viking world. For centuries, Viking has been shorthand for axe-wielding barbarians who descended from the frozen north to pillage and plunder unsuspecting shores. Hollywood blockbusters, TV dramas, and even children's cartoons have cemented this image. Horned, helmeted warriors charging out of longships, screaming war cries as they set fire to churches and drag villagers into the dark Scandinavian mist. But how accurate is this picture? The Viking Age officially runs from AD 793, when raiders attacked Lindisfarne Monastery in England, to roughly AD 1066, the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Early medieval chroniclers in England, Ireland, and Frankish lands describe horrifying coastal raids, churches sacked, monks slaughtered, treasures stolen. Such reports fueled a deep-seated fear of these Northmen, reinforcing the stereotype of Vikings as merciless heathens. Yet the sources must be read critically. Monks chronicling Lindisfarne's raid had every incentive to portray the attackers as ruthless demons from the sea, to strengthen the moral authority of the church and warn of divine punishment. Likewise, in West Francia, charters granting refuge or tribute to Scandinavian settlers, commonly called the Danelaw or Viking Normandy settlements, describe the Vikings first as scourges, then reluctantly as potential subjects or allies. So yes, raiding was real, but its scale and frequency varied. In some decades, coastal communities might suffer repeated strikes. In others, decades of peace passed. Archaeological surveys show that the bulk of England's north and east coast was hit repeatedly between the late 8th and early 10th centuries, but interior towns and villages were often untouched. Even in Scandinavia, raiding was a seasonal enterprise, carried out in spring and summer while farmers tended fields and families needed protection. Moreover, Viking raiders were often opportunistic entrepreneurs as much as warriors. They traveled in lightly armed longships, sometimes stopping to trade or to secure local alliances. Chronicle entries from the Irish Annals record Vikings trading amber, walrus ivory, and walrus oil for food, weapons, and even slaves. In many places, local lords opted to buy off raiders with danegeld, a negotiated tribute, rather than fight them. Cinematic battle scenes and epic sagas tend to blend every Viking into a single marauding horde. In reality, raiders came from diverse clans across modern Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, each with its own leadership, customs, and motivations. Some expeditions, like those led by the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok in the 9th century, may have had political or dynastic aims. Others, smaller, were nothing more than teenage crews seeking quick profit. The archetype of the savage Viking obscures the fact that Scandinavia itself was undergoing dramatic social change. Populations were rising, land was scarce. Younger sons had few prospects at home. Raiding offered a path to wealth, fame, and marriage prospects. It was a calculated risk, not mere bloodlust. Finally, yes, the Vikings left behind tales of brutality sagas like Egil's, the story of Harald Hardrada's campaigns, poems celebrating heroic battle exploits. But the same literature also extols virtues of generosity, hospitality, skillful seamanship, and fair diplomacy. Even the great Icelandic sagas written a century or two after the events they describe feature characters who prize commerce, travel long distances in search of new markets, and settle peacefully in far-flung lands. Beyond the horror stories of raiding, the Vikings mastered one of the great technological marvels of the Middle Ages, the longship. Sleek, shallow draft vessels built of overlapping planks, Propelled by oars and square sails, longships could navigate open ocean, wide rivers, and even shallow estuaries. These dual-capability ships allowed Norsemen to strike far inland, but also to travel great distance across the North Atlantic to Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. Around AD 870, Norse settlers established long-term colonies in Iceland. 20 years later, Eric the Red founded Greenland settlements. Saga manuscripts like the Saga of the Greenlanders and archaeological digs at El Anso Meadows in Newfoundland confirm that around AD 1000, Leif Erikson and his crew made landfall in Vinland, possibly in modern Labrador 400 years before Columbus. Though these western colonies failed to endure, they testified of Viking curiosity and maritime skill. Closer to home, the Vikings turned their ships into merchant vessels. In the 9th and 10th centuries, Swedish Vikings known as the Russ traveled down river systems Volga, Dnieper, establishing trade links with the Islamic caliphates of the Middle East. Archaeological hoards in Russia and Ukraine contain Arab silver dirhams, Central Asian silks, Byzantine coins, and Chinese silks, proof of an extensive Norse-mediated trade network that connected Scandinavia to Baghdad, Constantinople, and beyond. In Eastern Europe, the town of Novgorod flourished as a Viking outpost, its name likely derived from the Old Norse for new town. The primary chronicle of Kievan Rus describes Varangian Guard units in Constantinople's service, famously the Varangian Guard of the Byzantine emperors. These Norse mercenaries were valued for their loyalty and combat prowess, earning gold, land, and status in the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Western Europe, too, benefited from Viking trade. Excavations at Dublin, York, and Rouen reveal thriving marketplaces where Norse and local merchants exchanged furs, amber, iron, wine, glassware, and slaves. Urban centers like Dublin grew around Viking long forts fortified, riverine encampments that evolved into permanent settlements. In York, a once Roman town, the Vikings restored minting operations and promoted craft industries. Coinage, jewelry, and metalwork bearing Scandinavian motifs have been unearthed in large numbers. Viking traders also sailed down the Seine and Loire rivers into the heart of Frankish lands, exchanging goods for Frankish textiles and ceramics. Frankish nobles sometimes sponsored Viking fleets as mercenary forces, turning former raiders into military allies. Charters granting land and privileges to Viking settlers in Normandy show how quickly some raiders integrated into the local polity. At the edges of their world, Norse merchants reached as far as the Caspian Sea, Scandinavia's coasts, and even the Iberian Peninsula. Cordoba's 10th century geographer al-Bakri recorded Vikings of the sea, trading at Andalusian ports for slaves and silver, a reminder that maritime Norsemen were as much merchants as marauders. Archaeology has revolutionized our picture of the Viking Age, moving us beyond black and white depictions of barbarian versus civilized. Instead, it uncovers a tapestry of everyday life, economic innovation, and cultural exchange across Northern Europe and beyond. Let's start with burial mounds and ship burials. In Eseberg and Gokstad, richly furnished graves contain not only weapons and armor, but also sleds, textiles, wooden tubs, and even carved animal-headed sleds. The Eseberg ship burial included 2 high-status women interred in a complete 22-meter longship, accompanied by tapestries, carts, and 4 sledges, evidence of craftsmanship and ritual complexity, not mere warrior culture. In York's Coppergate excavations, archaeologists uncovered a Viking street lined with workshops. Metal workers produced brooches and arm rings. Leather workers crafted boots and belts. Silversmiths minted coins. Every level of that site showed Scandinavian building techniques, timber frames, underfloor heating, and characteristic pottery styles blended with local English traditions. It's a microcosm of cultural fusion rather than one-way domination. Trade hoards large caches of silver, gold, and precious objects buried for safekeeping. The Viking world. Rural archaeology also reshapes our view. Excavations of farmsteads in Denmark, Sweden, and Norway reveal multi-family longhouses, barns, and outbuildings that underwent continuous renovation across centuries. Animal bones, grain pits, and carbonized seeds show diversified agriculture: barley, oats, cattle, sheep, contrasting with the image of Vikings living solely for war. Many households produce surplus goods for local markets or long-distance trade. In Ireland and the British Isles, former Viking camps evolved into towns. At Waterford and Limerick, city walls, street grids, and fenced yards appear just a few decades after the first raids. Local laws adapted Scandinavian terminology and property structures, suggesting political integration rather than permanent conflict. Everyday objects, combs made from antler, gaming pieces of walrus ivory, imported glass beads from the Rhineland surface in domestic contexts. They speak not of a culture obsessed with killing, but of families invested in fashion, entertainment, and international connections. Viking women evidently managed households, farms, and even trading transactions, as runic inscriptions on objects sometimes mark female names. Finally, isotopic analysis of Viking-era skeletons reveals diverse diets and origins. In some burial sites, individuals consumed a marine-rich diet. In others, they ate more terrestrial grains and meats. Strontium isotope ratios indicate Scandinavians settled as far south as France and Britain, while some local-born individuals show Scandinavian isotopic signatures evidence of intermarriage and mobility. Archaeology teaches us that Vikings were a people of many faces, fierce raiders in some contexts, astute merchants in others. Colonists who formed new societies, soldiers who integrated into foreign armies, craftsmen, farmers, explorers, and state builders. They were neither pure barbarians nor unblemished heroes, but a dynamic culture adapting to an interconnected medieval world.